The years at the Devolve Ranch was good to me. I honed my skills, earned the respect of my peers, and built a life that I could be proud of. But even in the most beautiful landscapes, shadows can creep in. The biggest shadow looming over the West in those days was the conflict between cattlemen and the sheep herders. See, the cattlemen believed that the open range was their domain, and they didn't take kindly to sheep herders moving in and grazing their flocks on their lands. They claimed the sheep ruined the grass for cattle, and they saw the sheep herders as trespassers and interlopers. The tensions between the two groups had been building for years, and it was only a matter of time before it burrowed over into violence. Duval, being a fair and just man, tried to stay neutral in the conflict. He believed that there was enough land for everybody, and he urged his cowboys to treat the sheep herders with respect. But some of the cowboys, fueled by prejudice and greed, weren't willing to listen. They saw the sheep herders as a threat to their livelihood, and they were determined to drive them out the territories by any means necessary. I remember one night sitting around a campfire with the other cowboys. When the conversation turned to the sheep herders, the talk got heated. The whiskey flowed freely, and the air was filled with threats and insults. I tried to calm things down, to remind them of Duval's wishes, but that was no use. They were too far gone. We got to do something about those sheep herders. One of the cowboys, a hot-headed young fella named Jake, he said, they taking our land, and they ain't gonna stop until they driven us out of here. I told him Duval said we gotta leave him be. He wants us to stay out of it. Duval ain't gonna be the one starving when there's no grass left for our cattle, Jake resorted. We gotta take matters into our own hands. That night, a group of cowboys, led by Jake, rode out to a nearby sheep camp. They burned the herders' wagons, scattered their flocks, and left them stranded in the middle of the desert. It was a brutal and senseless act of violence, and it left a stain on Duval Ranch that would never be completely erased. When Duval found out what had happened, he was furious. He rounded up the cowboys who were responsible, including Jake, and fired them on the spot. He also offered to help the sheep herders rebuild their lives, but the damage had been done. The incident shook me to the core. It showed me the dark side of the West, the prejudice and the violence that lurked beneath the surface of the romanticized stories I had read as a little boy. It made me question everything I believed in, everything I had worked so hard to achieve. I started to wonder if I really belonged in this world, if I could ever truly escape the shadows of my past. Was I just fooling myself to think I could be accepted and respected regardless of my race? Those questions haunted me for weeks. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, and I was right. The something terrible I've been dreading wasn't a range war or a natural disaster. It was something far more personal, far more painful. It came from the form of betrayal. One of the cowboys on Duval Ranch, a man I considered a friend, a man I had trusted with my life, was secretly working with a rival rancher, a greedy and ruthless fella named Hank Thompson. Thompson wanted to buy up the Duval Ranch to add its vast acreage and valuable water rights to his own already considerable holdings. Duvall, of course, refused to sell. He loved his ranch. He loved his land. And he wasn't about to let some money-hungry cattle baron force him out. That's when Thompson decided to play dirty. He approached this cowboy whose name was Billy and offered him a deal. Help me sabotage the Duvall ranch and he get a share of the profits when Thompson took over. Billy, blinded by greed and resentment, agreed. He started by rustling cattle, stealing them from the Duvall ranch and driving them to Thompson's spread. He also sabotaged equipment, damaged fences, and spread rumors to undermine Duvall's authority. He was like a cancer, slowly eating away at the heart of the ranch. I noticed something was wrong. The cattle was disappearing, the equipment was breaking down, and the morals of the cowboys, it was plummeting. I tried to warn Duvall, but he dismissed my concerns. He trusts Billy implicitly, and he couldn't believe that he would betray him. One night, I was riding patrol when I stumbled upon Billy hurling in a group of Duvall's cattle toward Thompson's ranch. Man, I couldn't believe my eyes. The man I had trusted, the man I had considered a friend, he was a traitor. I confronted him, my heart heavy with anger and disappointment. He didn't deny. He admitted that he was working with Thompson, that he was being paid to destroy the Duvall ranch. He said, "I'm sorry, Nat." His voice filled with shame. But I needed the money. I have a family to support. You portraying your friends, your neighbors, and the man who gave you a chance. That's what I said. How can you live with yourself? I don't have a choice, he replied. Thompson will ruin us all if I don't do what he says. I knew I had to stop him. I couldn't let him destroy the Duvall ranch, the place that had become my home. We fought in the desperate and brutal struggle in the darkness. I didn't want to hurt him, but I had no choice. I had to protect the ranch. In the end, I overpowered him. I tied him up and I took him back to the ranch where I presented him to Duvall. Duvall was heartbroken. He couldn't believe that the man he trusted had betrayed him so completely. He turned Billy over to the authorities, and he was eventually convicted for rustling and sabotage. The betrayal shook Duvall deeply. He lost faith in people. He became withdrawn and suspicious, and he started to talk about selling the ranch. I tried to convince him to stay, to fight for what he believed in, but it was no use. The damage had been done. A few months later, Duvall sold the ranch to Thompson. Man, I was devastated. I had lost my home, my friend, and my faith in the goodness of people. I knew I couldn't stay in Arizona. The place was tainted by betrayal and loss. So I packed my belongings, I saddled up my horse, and I rode off into the sunset, searching for a new place to call home. This time, I knew it would be harder than ever to trust. With the sting of betrayal fresh in my heart, I rode north, aimless and lost. The vastness of the West, once a source of comfort and opportunity, now felt cold and indifferent. I drifted through Wyoming and Montana, taking odd jobs here and there, but never staying in one place for long. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed by the ghost of my past, the faces of those I had trusted and lost. One day, while working on the ranch near the Tongue River, I encountered a group of Northern Cheyennes. They were led by a wise and dignified old man named Two Moons, a respected leader known for his courage and his commitment to peace. The Cheyennes had been forced onto a reservation, their traditional way of life disrupted, their land stolen, and their people subjugated to poverty and injustice. But despite the hardship they faced, they maintained their dignity and their spirit. I was drawn to their resilience, their connection to the land, and their deep sense of community. I spent several weeks with them, learning about the culture, their beliefs, and their struggles. I learned to speak their language, to ride like they did, and to hunt with a bow and arrow. They, in turn, they were curious about me. They had heard stories of the Buffalo Soldier, the black soldier who fought for the U.S. Army, and they were weary of any colored man who came to their camp. But Two Moons, he saw something different in me. He saw my pain, my loneliness, my yearning for connection. He saw that I was not a soldier, but a wanderer, a man who had been wounded by the world and was seeking solace and understanding. He welcomed me into his community, shared wisdom with me, and taught me the importance of respect, compassion, and living in harmony with nature. He showed me that true strength comes from not conquering others, but from healing oneself. I learned about spiritual beliefs, the reverence of the Great Spirit, and the understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things. I participated in their ceremonies, danced around their fires, and prayed for guidance and healing. I saw a sense of peace and belonging that I hadn't felt since I was a little boy. I realized that the West wasn't just about cowboys and cattle. It was about the Native Americans, the original inhabitants of the land, who had wisdom and connections to the earth that I had never understood before. But even in this oasis of peace, the outside world intruded. The U.S. Army was constantly encroaching on the Cheyennes' territory, building forts, driving away the buffalo, and harassing the native people. Two Moons knew war was inevitable. He knew that the Cheyennes could not live in peace while the army was determined to destroy their way of life. He made the difficult decision to resist, to fight for their land, their freedom, and their survival. He asked me to join them. He said that I had proven myself to be loyal and a trustworthy friend, and that they needed all the help they could get. I was torn. I didn't want to fight, but I couldn't stand and watch as the Cheyennes was driven from their homes and their cultures destroyed. I knew that I had to join them. I knew that that would mean risking my life and possibly facing the wrath of the U.S. government. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do. I owed it to the Cheyennes, to Two Moons, and to myself to stand up for what I believed in. So with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience, I made my decision. I would fight alongside the Northern Cheyennes. I would risk everything to defend their way of life. Putting on war paint felt strange, almost surreal. Now look at me, Nat Love, former slave, cowboy, and now a Cheyenne warrior. Life had a way of throwing you curves you never saw coming. I knew this wasn't my fight by birthright, but after seeing the injustice firsthand, after sharing their lives and their pain, it had become my fight in spirit. Two Moons tasked me with scouting, using my knowledge of the land and my experience as a cowboy to track the movements of the army. I was good at it, maybe too good. It was strange, using the skills I learned to wrangle cattle to now try to outwit soldiers. I was a ghost in plain sight, watching, learning, and reporting back to Two Moons. The first skirmishes were small, hit-and-run attacks designed to harass the army and disrupt their supply lines. We raided wagons and trains, ambushed patrols, and harassed construction crews. It was a desperate attempt to slow down the inevitable, to buy the Cheyennes time to prepare for what was coming, the coming storm. I witnessed things I never thought I'd imagine. The raw courage of the Cheyenne warriors fighting with bow and arrows against soldiers armed with repeating rifles. I witnessed the desperation of women and children that was forced to flee their homes and live in hiding. The brutality of these soldiers who often showed no mercy to those who they captured. One raid in particular seared itself into my memory. We attacked a supply wagon, hoping to seize much needed food and ammunition. But the soldiers was well prepared. They had set up an ambush, and we rolled right into it. The fighting was fierce and chaotic. Bullets whizzed through the air, arrows flying in every direction, and the screams of the wounded, it filled the air. I fought alongside a young Cheyenne warrior. His name was Lil Wolf. He was barely more than a boy, but he fought with the ferocity of a seasoned veteran. Suddenly, I saw Little Wolf fall to the ground. He was clenching his chest. He had been shot. I rushed to his side, but it was too late. He was dead. His eyes stared blankly up into the sky. His life cut short by the senseless violence of war. His death hit me hard. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of this conflict. It made me question whether what we was doing was right, whether the fight was worth the price. But then I looked around at the faces of the other Cheyenne warriors, their eyes filled with determination and defiance. I knew that I couldn't give up, not after I saw their eyes. We had to keep fighting for Lil Wolf, for Two Moons, and for the future of their people. The war dragged on for months, a bloody and desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. The Cheyennes fought bravely, but they were ultimately outmatched. The army had more men, more weapons, and more resources. They were ruthless, relentless in their pursuit, and they eventually conquered the Cheyennes in a remote village. The battle that followed was a massacre. The soldiers opened fire on the Cheyenne camps, killing men, women, and children. Those who survived were forced to surrender, their spirits broken, their dreams shattered. Two Moons was among those who surrendered. He knew that further resistance was futile. The only way to save his people was to lay down his arms. He walked into the army camp. He had his head held high, his eyes filled with sadness and resignation. I watched from a distance as Two Moons was taken into custody. I knew I couldn't stay. The army, they would have recognized me, and I would have been arrested as a traitor. I turned my horse and rode away, leaving behind the Cheyennes, their land, and their broken dreams. I rode for days. My heart was heavy with grief and guilt. I felt like I failed. I failed to protect the Cheyennes, to stop the war, to make a difference. I was just one man, and the forces against us, they was too strong. But even in the face of defeat, I just couldn't give up. I knew I had to keep fighting in my own way for justice, for equality, and for a better future. I didn't know what the future would look like, but I knew I had to keep riding. I knew I had to keep searching and keep hoping. The only question was, where did a man like me go after something like that? After leaving the Cheyennes, I wandered for a while, a ghost in my own life. I couldn't bring myself to return to the cowboy life, not after what I had seen and done. The open range felt tainted. The camaraderie of the cowhand, it felt hollow. I was adrift, caught between two worlds and belonging to neither. Eventually, desperation led me to a decision that even surprised myself. Shit. I enlisted in the U.S. Army. Ironic, wasn't it? After fighting against them, I was now wearing their uniform. But I saw it as a chance to do some good, to protect the native people from within the system. I figured a black man in a blue uniform, I might be able to make a difference, however small. I joined the 10th Cavalry, one of the famed Buffalo Soldier regiments. These were all black units made up from former slaves and freedmen who were fighting for their country, even though their country didn't always fight for them. Life as a Buffalo Soldier, it was hard. We were stationed in remote and desolated outpoints, patrolling the last and unforgiving landscape of the Southwest. We faced harsh weather. We had scarce supplies and constant danger. And of course, we faced prejudice, both from white officers and from white settlers we were supposed to be protecting. Many settlers, they ain't want us there. They saw us as less than them. They didn't trust us protecting them. They wanted the soldiers who looked like them protecting them. But the Buffalo Soldiers, we were proud and a resilient bunch. We looked out for each other, supported each other, and fought for each other. We knew that we had to be better than the white soldiers, that we had to prove ourselves every day. Our primary mission was to protect settlers from bandits and them outlaws, and to maintain peace on the reservations. We were also tasked with building roads, escorting wagons, and fighting wildfires. I excelled as a soldier. My experience as a cowboy and as a scout for the Cheyennes made me a valuable asset to the regiment. I knew the land. I knew how to track, and I knew how to fight. I quickly rose through the ranks, earning the respect of my fellow soldiers and even some of the white officers. But I never forgot what I had seen, what I had done, the memories of Little Wolf Death, the faces of the Cheyenne women and children, the betrayal of Billy that haunted me every day. I knew that I could never fully escape my past, but I could try to make amends, to use my skills and my position to help those who needed it most. I tried to treat the native people with respect, to listen to their concerns, and to protect them from harm. I spoke out against injustice whenever I saw it, even if it meant risking my career. But I also knew that I was part of a system that was inherently unjust. The Army was ultimately there to enforce the government's policies, which were often often detrimental to the native people. I was caught in a moral dilemma. I was trying to do good within a system that was designed to do harm. One day, we were ordered to escort a group of Cheyennes back to their reservations. They had been caught off the reservations hunting for food and were being forced to return. I recognized some of them. They were from Two Moons Band, the same people I had fought alongside just a few years earlier. They looked at me with suspicion and distrust. They couldn't understand why I was wearing a blue uniform, why I was helping to enforce the very policies that had destroyed their way of life. I tried to explain. I tried to tell them that I was trying to help, but they wouldn't listen. They saw me as a traitor, a sellout, a pawn of the white man. Their words stung. It stung hard. They reminded me of my own hypocrisy, of the compromise I had made. I knew that they were right. I was a pawn, a cog in the machine, but I also knew I couldn't just walk away. I had to keep fighting. I had to keep trying to make a difference, no matter how small. As we rode towards the reservation, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness and regret. I had come full circle from fighting against the army to fighting for them, from trying to protect the Cheyennes to helping to imprison them. I was lost, confused, and uncertain of what the future held. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay a Buffalo Soldier forever. I needed to find a new path, a new purpose, a new way to make amends for the mistakes of my past. And that meant leaving the army and venturing out into the West once more, searching for redemption. Leaving the army felt like shucking off a heavy skin. But freedom, I quickly learned, didn't come with a map. I needed work, a purpose, something to keep the ghost at bay. So I headed to Denver, a city that was booming faster than a gold strike, hoping to find a place to start over. Denver was a wild mix. Cowboys fresh off the range, sharp-suited businessmen looking to make a killing, miners flush with gold dust, and more than a few outlaws eager to take it away from them. The city was growing so fast, the law couldn't keep up. The police was stretched thin, and some was as crooked as a dog's hind leg. I ended up working security at a saloon. It was grunt work, mostly breaking up fights and keeping drunks from getting too rowdy. But it paid the rent. One night, a fella named Horton, dressed in a fine suit, approached me. He said he knew about my past, the cowboy, the scouting with the Cheyennes, even my time with the Buffalo Soldier. He said he admired me and my skills and my grit. Then he offered me a job, private detective work. I nearly laughed in his face. Me, a detective? I didn't know the first thing about it, but Horton was persistent. He said Denver needed honest men who weren't afraid to stand up to the powerful and protect the innocent. He'd teach me everything I needed to know. Truth be told, I was desperate. I needed a purpose, and Horton offer sounded like a chance to use my skills for something more than just busting heads in a salon. So I took it. Horton was a good teacher. He showed me how to investigate a crime scene, how to find clues, and how to interview witnesses, and how to spot a liar. He taught me the law, the rules of evidence, and the delicate art of navigating Denver's corrupt political landscape. I took to detective work like a horse to water. My years on the range had taught me how to observe detail, how to track, and how to read people. I had a knack for finding the truth, even when it was buried deep beneath layers of lies and deception. I handled all sorts of cases: stolen horses, missing persons, fraud schemes, even cold-blooded murder. I saw the best and I saw the worst of Denver. I saw the poverty that drove people to desperation, the greed that fueled corruption, and the violence that simmered just beneath the surface. But I also saw acts of kindness, moments of courage, and the unwavering hope of decent folks trying to build a better life. I used my position to help those who couldn't help themselves. I protected the weak from the strong. I exposed the corruption, and I fought for justice no matter who it was for or against. One case sticks out in my mind. A young black singer was accused of killing a wealthy white man. The cops was ready to railroad her. The newspaper, they had already condemned her, and nobody seemed to care about the truth. But I saw something in her eyes. Fear, yes, but I also saw innocence. I started digging around, and what I found was a web of lies and secrets. The dead man was a powerful businessman with a dark side. And the singer, she was just a pawn in his game. He'd been blackmailing her, threatening her family, and when she tried to break free, he turned to violence. She acted in self-defense, but he was dead, and she was the perfect scapegoat. The police, they didn't want to hear. They had their suspect, and they weren't about to let a colored woman off the hook. But I wouldn't let it go. I gathered the evidence, I tracked down witnesses, and I confronted the real killer, a jealous businessman who had secretly been involved with the dead man. Faced with the truth, he confessed. The singer was freed, and her name was cleared. It was a small victory, but it reminded me why I had become a detective in the first place: to protect the vulnerable and to fight for justice, even when the odds were stacked against me. I spent several years in Denver, making a name for myself as a fair and honest detective. But the pull of the West, it was strong. I knew I couldn't stay in the city forever. The wide open spaces, it was calling me. And there was still adventures to be had, wrongs to be righting, and a destiny that I couldn't ignore. The lure of the open range, combined with a nagging restlessness, eventually drew me away from Denver. I made a name for myself, sure, but I was still running from my past in some ways, trying to outrun the ghosts of the Cheyenne and the betrayal at the Duval Ranch. The city, for all its opportunities, it felt like a cage. So I packed my bags. I said goodbye to Horton, who wasn't thrilled to see me go, but understood the call of the wild and pointed to my horse south, towards the Mexican border. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I had a feeling I'll find it down there. The borderlands, that was a different world. The air was hotter, the landscape harsher, and the people a mix of cultures and languages. It was a place where the law was often ignored, where fortunes was made and lost in a heartbeat, and where danger lurked right around the corner. I found work as a bounty hunter, tracking down criminals who had fled across the border to escape justice. It was a dangerous job, but it suited me. It allowed me to use my skills as a tracker and a fighter. And it gave me a sense of purpose again. I worked with a colorful cast of characters, grizzled old prosecutors, cunning Mexican bandits, and corrupt government officials. I learned to speak Spanish to navigate the trenches of the terrain and to survive in the lawless environment. One case in particular, it stands out in my memory. I was hired to track down a gang of American outlaws who robbed a bank in Arizona and fled across the border with a fortune of gold. The gang was led by a notorious bandit named El Diablo, a ruthless killer with a reputation for cruelty. They were held up in a remote mountain village, protected by a network of corrupted officials and local thugs. I tracked them for weeks. I followed their trails through the desert and the mountains. I had to be careful as they had eyes and ears everywhere. I knew if they caught me, they wouldn't hesitate to kill me. Eventually, I located their hideout. It was a forfeited hacienda, surrounded by high walls and guarded by heavily armed men. It looked like an impossible task to break in, but I knew I had to try. I spent several days studying the layout of the hacienda, observing the guard routines, and looking for a weakness in their defense. I discovered a hidden tunnel that led into the hacienda's courtyard. It was a risky plan, but it was my only chance. Under the cover of darkness, I slipped through the tunnel into the hacienda. I moved silently through the shadows, avoiding the guards and making my way toward the main house. Then I found El Diablo in his private office, counting his stolen gold. He was surrounded by his henchmen. They was all armed to the teeth. I knew I was outnumbered, but I couldn't back down now. I burst into the room, guns blazing. A fierce gunfight erupted. Bullets was flying everywhere, all directions, shedding glass, tearing through furniture. I fought like a man possessed. I was using my skills and my courage to take down the outlaws one by one, gunning them down. El Diablo was a formidable opponent. He was quick, strong, and cold-blooded ruthless. We fought hand to hand, trading blows, dodging bullets. In the end, I managed to overpower him. I knocked him to the ground, then I disarmed him and held him at gunpoint. The remaining outlaws surrendered. I recovered the stolen gold and turned them over to the authorities. The town held me as a hero. I wasn't even looking for all that, but the victory was bittersweet. I had brought justice to the town, but I had also taken lives. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming the very thing I was fighting against, a ruthless killer who was willing to do anything to get the job done. I knew that I couldn't continue down this path. I need to find a way to use my skills for good without sacrificing my soul. And I knew that the answer lay somewhere back in the United States, in the land where I was born, where I had suffered, and where I still hope to find redemption. So I packed my bags once again and pointed my horse north, back towards the land of the free, or at least the land that was supposed to be free. Crossing back into the United States felt like coming up for air after a long dive. The air was cleaner, the people were more familiar, and there was a sense of possibility that had been missing in the borderlands. I was still haunted by my past, but I was also filled with a renewed sense of hope for the future. I drift north through New Mexico, hearing whispers of a new town springing up. A town founded by black folks, for black folks. It was called Blackdom. The idea intrigued me. A place where black people could own land, build businesses, and govern themselves, free from the prejudice and discrimination that plagued so much of this country. It sounded too good to be true, but I had to see for myself. Blackdom was located in the southern parts of New Mexico, a patch of fertile land carved out of the harsh desert. It was founded in 1903 by a minister named Reverend Frank Boyer, a visionary leader who believed in the power of self-determination and the promise of the American West. When I arrived, I was struck by the energy and the optimism of the town. People were busy building homes, planting crops, and opening up businesses. There was a sense of community and pride that I ain't seen before anywhere else. Blackdom was a heaven for black people from all over the country, escaping the Jim Crow South and the racial violence of the East. They came seeking opportunity and freedom and a chance to build a better life for themselves and their families. I met farmers, teachers, businessmen, and artists all working together to create a thriving community. They were determined to prove that black people could succeed even in the face of adversity. Reverend Boyer, he welcomed me with open arms. He saw my potential, my skills, and my desire to make a difference. He offered me a job as a deputy sheriff, helping to maintain the law and order in the town. I accepted the offer with no hesitation. It was a chance to use my skills for good, to protect the innocent, and to contribute to the community that I believed in. Life in Blackdom was challenging, but rewarding. We faced droughts, floods, and even economic hardships. We also faced prejudice from the surrounding white communities who resented our success and tried to undermine our efforts. But we persevered. We supported each other. We worked hard, and we never gave up on our dreams. Blackdom became a beacon of hope for black people all over the country, a symbol of what was possible when we came together and we believed in ourselves. I fell in love with Blackdom. I felt like I had finally found a place where I belong, a place where I could just be myself, a place where I could even make a difference. I made friends, I built relationships, and I started to believe that I could finally put my past behind me. But the peace couldn't last forever. The forces of greed and prejudice was gathering, and they were determined to destroy Blackdom and its dreams and a self-determination. The question wasn't if trouble would come, but when and how. Blackdom thrived for a few years, but that was only due to the determination of the people. We built a school, a church, a bank, and a thriving business district. We farmed the land, raised livestock, and traded with neighboring communities. We even started our own newspaper, the Blackdom Booster. It spread the word about our success and to advocate for our rights. But our success, it attracted unwanted attention. The surrounding white communities, envious of our prosperity and resentful of our independence, began to plot against us. They spread rumors, harassed our residents. They sabotaged our businesses. They tried to isolate us, to cut us off from the outside world. The biggest threat came from a group of wealthy white landowners who coveted our land. They wanted to expand their holdings. They saw blackdom as an obstacle to their ambition. They started to try to buy us out, offering us small amounts for our lands and our businesses. We refused to sell. They resorted to more aggressive tactics. They cut off our water supply. They poisoned our livestock. And they set fire to our buildings. I, as deputy sheriff, I was on the front lines of the whole conflict. I investigated the crimes, arrested the perpetrators, and tried to maintain order. But the white authorities were often unwilling to help us. They sided with the white landowners, dismissing our complaints, releasing the criminals we arrested. The situation grew increasingly tense. The white landowners, they hired armed thugs to terrorize our community. They patrolled our streets, threatened our residents, and tried to intimidate us into leaving. We armed ourselves, formed a militia, and prepared to defend the town. We knew we were outnumbered and outgunned, but we were determined to protect our homes and our families and our way of life. Reverend Boyer, despite his peaceful nature, he understood that we had no choice but to fight back. He rallied the community, reminding us of our strength, our courage, and our commitment to justice. He urged us to stand our ground, to never give up on our dream. One night, the white landowners, they launched a full-scale attack on blackdom. A group of armed men rode into the town, shooting up buildings, setting fires, and terrorizing residents. The blackdom militia fought back bravely, engaging in the attackers in a fierce gunfight. I led the defense, using my skills and my expertise to protect the town. We managed to repel the initial attack, but we knew that it was only a matter of time before they returned. We sent the word to the nearby black communities, asking for backup, but the white landowners had blocked the roads, preventing anyone from reaching us. We were on our own. The next morning, the white landowners returned with even more men and more guns. They surrounded blackdom, cutting off all routes. They was determined to destroy our town and to drive us far from our homes. The battle for blackdom had begun. It was a fight for our survival, a fight for our freedom, and a fight for our dignity. We knew that we were facing overwhelming odds, but we were not afraid. We were blackdom, and we would not be defeated, not without a fight. The battle raged for hours. The streets of blackdom became a war zone, full of the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and screams. Women and even children fought side by side, defending their homes and their families. We were outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched in spirit. We fought with courage of desperation, knowing that our very survival depended on it. I moved from street to street, rallying the defenders, providing cover fire, and tending to the wounded. Reverend Boyer, armed with a rifle and a Bible, stood on the steps of the church, inspiring the community with his words of faith and defiance. He was the beacon of hope in the midst of this chaos, reminding us that God was on our side and that we would not be defeated. But the white landowners, they were relentless. They pulled more and more men into the battle, overwhelming our defenses. One by one, our buildings fell, consumed by flames. Our defenders fell, their bodies laying in the streets. I watched in horror as our dreams, our community, and our way of life was being destroyed right before my eyes. I felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to avenge the fallen and protect the innocent. I charged into the thick of the fighting, taking down as many as attackers as I could. It was a whirlwind of fury, a force of nature unleashed. But I couldn't be everywhere at once. Suddenly, Reverend Boyer, he fell to the ground, clenching his chest. He had been shot by a sniper. I rushed by his side, but it was too late. He was dying. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pain, but also with peace. Don't give up, Nat. That's what he whispered. Keep fighting for our dreams. Keep fighting for justice. Keep fighting for Blackdom. Then, with the final breath, he was gone. His death broke my heart. It was the final straw. That moment I realized that we couldn't win. We were facing a force too powerful, too ruthless, too determined to destroy us. I gathered the remaining defenders and ordered them to retreat. We couldn't save Blackdom. We couldn't save ourselves. We fled into the desert, leaving behind our homes, our possessions, and our dreams. As I looked back at Blackdom, engulfed in flames, I felt a deep sense of loss and despair. A town, a community, a haven, it was gone. It was destroyed by greed, racism, and violence. But I also felt the flicker of hope. We had survived. I couldn't believe we had escaped. And we could rebuild. We could carry the spirit of Blackdom with us wherever we went. We would never forget what we had lost. And we would never give up on our dreams for that better future. The fall of Blackdom, it was a tragedy. But it was not the end of the story. It was a new beginning, a call to action, a reminder that the fight for justice and equality, it was far from over. And I, Nat Love, Deadwood Dick, was ready to answer that call. The aftermath of Blackdom was a blur of grief, displacement, and uncertainty. We scattered to the winds, seeking refuge in other Black communities and sympathetic towns, or simply drifting, lost in delusion. The dream had died hard, leaving a scar on our collective soul. For a long time, I wandered, a man without a purpose. The badge of deputy sheriff felt like a brand, a reminder of my failure to protect Blackdom. The gun, once a symbol of justice, felt heavy and tainted. I couldn't bring myself to use it. But the spirit of Reverend Boyer, his words echoing in my mind, wouldn't let me rest. Don't give up, Nat. Keep fighting for our dream. Keep fighting for justice. Keep fighting for Blackdom. His words resonated deep within me, reminding me that even in the darkest of times, hope could still flicker. I began to realize that Blackdom wasn't just a place. It was an idea, a symbol of self-determination, of community, and an unwavering belief that I could have a better future. And the idea, it couldn't be destroyed by fire or violence. It lived on in the hearts of those who had survived. I started to seek out other survivors, to connect with them, to share our stories and rekindle that hope. We found each other in churches, in meeting halls, and in the shadows of the night. We spoke to blackdom with reverence and sorrow, but also with a renewed sense of purpose. We decided to honor the memory of blackdom by continuing the fight for justice and equality. Wherever we went, we became teachers, activists, lawyers, and entrepreneurs, working to uplift the community and challenge the systems of oppression that had destroyed our town. I, in my own way, found a new path. I started writing. I wrote about blackdom, about the peoples who had lived there, about the dreams that had been shattered, and about the hope that still remained. I wrote about my own life, my experiences as a cowboy, as a scout, and as a soldier, as a detective, and as a resident of blackdom. I wanted to share my story with the world, to shed light on the contributions of black people to the American West, and to inspire others to fight for justice and equality. I published my own biography, The Life and Adventures of Nat Love, better known in the cattle country than the president. It was a modest success, but it reached the right people. It sparked conversation, challenged assumptions, and helped to change the narrative about the Old West. I traveled the country, giving speeches, sharing my story, and advocating for black rights. I became a voice for the voiceless, a champion for the oppressed, and a symbol of hope for the future. I never forgot blackdom. It remained a part of me, a consistent reminder of the importance of community, of self-determination, and the unwavering belief in the power of dreams. Years passed, the West changed, the frontier faded, cities grew, and the world moved on. But the spirit of blackdom lived on, carried by those who survived and passed on to future generations. I lived a long and full life, filled with adventure, hardship, and ultimately with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. I never became rich or famous, but I made a difference. I touched lives, inspired hope, and helped to create a more just and equitable world. As I grew old, I often look back on my own life, wondering if I had made the right choices. Had I done enough? Had I lived up to the legacy of blackdom? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I had never given up. I had kept fighting, kept dreaming, and kept believing in the possibility of a better future. And that's when I realized that's all that matters. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows across the plain. I can feel the end drawing near and the final ride coming close. But I'm not afraid. Oh no, I'm not afraid. I lived a good life, a life filled with purpose and meaning. I look out at the horizon, at the promise of a new dawn, and I smile. The fight for justice continues, and I know that the spirit of blackdom will live on, guiding and inspiring those who come after. My name is Nat Love, but some folks know me as Deadwood Dick. I was a cowboy, a scout, a soldier, a detective, and a resident of blackdom. But most importantly, I was a fighter for justice, a believer in dreams, and a hope for the better tomorrow. And now, it's my time to ride off in the sunset. But know this, The ride never truly ends. The fight continues and the dream lives on.